Hey guys, Triple B here. We just concluded the second week of the Budget Build Battle Tournament. Well, for the first official season of the format at least. If you're not familiar with this type of format, it's an alternate way to play the Pokemon TCG. There's no rule box cards allowed though, so EXs, Vs, Radiants, and A-Specs, leave those at home. We're focusing just on the single prize Pokemon. As another little bit of interesting tidbit for deck building though, we do limit the amount of cards you can run to just 2 copies of a card that has the same name. Slight exceptions are made though for basic Pokemon, so if it evolves into a stage 1, you can have 1 extra copy of the basic in your deck, and if it evolves into a stage 2 that's in your list, you can have 2 extra copies of the basic just to help for consistency. And basic energy, technically we view them as not having a name, so you can run as many of those as you want, but everything else, special energies, trainer cards, and Pokemon, just 2 copies of those with the same name. But with that all aside, we're going to jump into the top 8 decks from this week's tournament. So, in 8th place, we did see Milky, who ran Torterra. So we're calling it Milky Turtles. Don't ask how you do that. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen, Meet the Parents. Same logic applies. I'll just leave it at that. Torterra, though, has the attack Evo Press. It's going to do 50 damage for each of your evolution Pokemon in play. It evolves from Grottle, that has the ability Sun-Drenched Shell, allowing you to search your deck once per turn for a grass Pokemon. It can be a basic or an evolution, so a great way to just get a bunch of evolutions online for Torterra to start scaling up damage. Ideally, you're going evolve one Turtwig up to evolve one Turtwig up to a Grottle, Grottle out another Grottle for Turtwig to evolve up into, and then those kind of just loop and flood the rest of your board with grass Pokemon. You can even be going one Turtwig, Rare Candy up to a Torterra, and keep Grottles on your bench to just be able to just keep thinning your deck out of grass Pokemon turn after turn. For some solid grass Pokemon in the list, you do have a line of Beautifly, who can draw until you have 6 cards in your hand once per turn. 2 of these in the list, so you can effectively have them just being your draw supporters for turn and freeing up your supporters for a bit more utility. So things like Boss's Orders to get some solid gust plays in, or even Chorus's Tenacity, helping you get an energy from the list and into a Stadium card. Stadium of choice in this one being Town Store, which can be used to grab things like Evolution TM or Luxury Cape. Chuck one of these capes on your Torterra, you get up to 290 HP on there. Pretty beefy boy. Will give up 2 prizes if he gets knocked out though, so a little bit of liability. Be great if you can get some more health on it, and you can with another grass Pokemon, Cricketune. It's going to boost all your grass Pokemon in play by another 40 health. So effectively Torterra with a cape and a Cricket, 330 HP on it. It's basically an EX Pokemon in a single prize format, which is a little bit nutty. Another grass Pokemon showing up in here is Toedscruel. So its ability Slime Mold Colony makes it so that cards that are in your opponent's discard pile can't be put back into their hand off effects from, well, trainers or abilities. So yeah, things like Lana's Aid, which is really good in this format, Night Stretcher, which is really helpful in this format, Energy Retrieval. Your opponent wants to be able to loop things, and this guy just kind of pops out behind the tree and goes, yeah, no, you can't do that. And you know what? Fair enough. The rest of the deck, though, it's pretty standard stuff for the format. We did already talk about Boss. We've got Iono as draw support, Arven just as a way to target items from your deck, as well as getting those tools, which we did already cover, and then just your standard Pokemon search. So things like Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, Buddy Buddy Poffin, and recovery cards like Night Stretcher. Being a grass deck, you do have Bug Catching set, letting you look at the top 7 cards of your deck and grabbing 2 in any combination of basic grass energy or grass Pokemon that you find there. It's a really great consistency piece to have. If you are kind of new to the game or just curious about a bit more of the logic behind these cards, always happy to answer comments down in the comment section below. But we're going to be hopping into the next decks, and any of these that come up, we're kind of going to skim over and just focus on the Pokemon cards in the list. The 7th place list, we have Destra. Welcome to the Goomba game, GOG5562. I'm recording this live over on Twitch, so if you're watching it on YouTube and you're like, why is there a Goomba? Well, we just had a new member of the Goomba gang join up, so if you want to catch me live, you can become a member too. But for this 7th place list piloted by Destra, it is kind of like a psychic box deck. So you have a Xatu that has the ability Clairvoyant Sense. You can attach a basic psychic energy from your hand to one of your benched Pokemon, and then you draw 2 cards. So a great way to get card advantage as well as energy acceleration. You can be charging up some great attackers like Pheasantipity, who's going to scale up damage based on each energy it has attached to it. So you go attach for turn, Xatu to it, can start doing some pretty silly numbers. Also having the ability Adrena Pheromone. So if this has a dark energy attached to it, anytime it gets attacked, you're going to flip a coin. If it's heads, you just ignore the damage they're trying to do to you. So yeah, you got psychic energy in here, you got some dark energy in here. As another way to get the dark energy onto it though, aside from just manually attaching, you do also have Power Glass, which at the end of your turn, If the Pokemon this is attached to is in the active, which you're ideally having Pheasantipity in the active attacking, you get to attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to it. So end of your turn, maybe you don't have a dark energy on your Pheasantipity and it goes to your opponent and you're like, oh, well, if they attack me, I might take damage. Just have a dark energy in your discard pile, Power Glass on your Pheasantipity, and it's like, well, end of my turn, now there is a dark energy on here and potentially it's invincible. The dark energy also helps out for Monkey Dory, so it can use Adrena Brain, moving 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon onto your opponents. Not a bad idea, especially with things like Frostlass running around in the format. It's got an ability, take some damage, and then you just go, here, you have that damage. It's pretty nice. And the attack on there also being very relevant, 60 damage and confusing your opponent's active Pokemon, making them have to do a coin flip to see if they can even damage you. Another attacker showing up in here is Mawile, scaling up by 30 damage for each psychic energy attached to it, so just kind of like a slightly worse Pheasantipity, doesn't really have the ability protecting it and is limited to just the psychic energy attached to it, scaling up the damage, but just another quick attacker you can get online. And another attacking option in Hypno, who has Daydream. It does 80 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, if they attach an energy card from their hand to the defending Pokemon, so you hit the thing in the active, if they don't evolve through or switch out, and then they try and attach an energy to it, their turn ends. So yeah, a little bit disruptive. I kind of like it. Rest of the cards in here, though, I feel are pretty self-explanatory. Tulip being sort of like a Lonazade specifically for Psychic Pokemon. You get 4 in any combination of Psychic Pokemon or basic Psychic Energy from your discard pile and pop them right back into your hand. And Moonlit Hill providing a very helpful answer into spread decks. So you can discard a Psychic Energy card from your hand and heal 30 damage from each of your Pokemon. So into spread decks this helps, and into decks that run Frostlass, it's a great way to just heal a bunch of damage off your board. So honestly, solid call up. In 6th place, we're seeing Jess Ghoul, who ran a deck they're calling Inconsistent Bulk. And yeah, I'll be honest, it's a bit of a pile, but you know what? They got 6th place, so you can't really knock it. They've got Raging Bolt, who can do 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each energy attached to it. They've got Petrant, that when it's in the active spot, you put 5 more damage counters on a poison Pokemon in the active. To poison your opponent's active, you've got Brute Bonnet, who if it has Ancient Boots Capital, can just poison both active Pokemon. And then they've got a Haxorus line in here, who can 1 fighting energy, just knock out your opponent's active Pokemon if it has a special energy attached, or a Fighting Steel to do 230 while milling the top 3 cards off your own deck. To get into the Haxorus, they've got Axew, who can use Ultra Evolution, flip a coin. If it's heads, search your deck for a Haxorus and immediately evolve into it, so you might not even need to rare candy into it. And a Galvantula for a grass and a colorless does 50 damage, but if it's got a lightning energy on it, 80 more. So ideally 130 if you're using the right energies to power this up. And Compound Eyes boosting the damage it does by 50 if you're hitting something with an ability. So can theoretically get up to 180 damage. Not a bad shout. Bibarel for some draw power, Monkey Dory for some damage counter shenanigans, and Tatsugiri to help you kind of thin through your deck, getting into supporter cards while it's in the active. The rest of the list, yeah, it's kind of just a pile, but you know what? It apparently got some wins, so fair enough. In 5th place, we have X Factor, who ran Wug Life. So you got Wug Trio, Undersea Tunnel. You're going to flip 3 coins. For each heads, discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. So a solid milling option. Charging this up with Reversal Energy, counting as 3 energy of any type if you're behind on prizes, so paying the 3 energy cost on Wug Trio in a pinch. You can also be using things like Double Turbo Energy and then just basic Psychic Energy to pay that attack cost in another way while not necessarily being behind on prizes. For a little bit faster mill though, we do have Comfy. Flower Shower makes each player draw 3 cards, so it's another way to kind of get your opponent milling their deck. They're not discarding the cards, but they're still having to draw it. So to close out the game, you see they have 3 or less cards in their hand, or in their deck. It's a good way to get through it. Early in the game, you might be helping them get into setup though, and with ways to kind of shuffle your hand back into your deck, like Iono and Judge seeing quite a bit of play, they can just put those cards back in. So being able to use Wug Trio to actually discard them is obviously the more beneficial way to do it, but having a secondary thing to kind of help out with mill, yeah, I see the logic for it. Also having Ralts in here with Memory Skip, 1 Psychic Energy, and you can just choose one of your opponent's attacks and say, you can't use that. So if you pair somebody that only has 1 main attacker and only has 1 attack, like Torterra and Evo Press, you just go Memory Skip, you're not hitting me. And they're gonna have a bad time. They're not gonna have fun. Likely having to draw through their deck, trying to get into switch cards, which ideally you've milled through so that they can pivot into a different Pokemon and declare one of its attacks, or having a hard retreat and then recommit energy somehow to something else. It can really buy you some time and disrupt opponents. Bibarel for some draw support, and Skwovet to combo amazingly with it, shuffling your hand into your deck, then drawing one card, and the Bibarel kind of just draws you into a fresh 5, or in reverse if you use the supporter card beforehand. Manaphy for bench protection, and then yeah, the supporter cards in here, pretty standard stuff. Xyrosix Machinations though, I don't think we've talked about before. Your opponent discards cards from their hand until they only have 3 left. So that's kind of a nice one for Comfy. You make your opponent get a big hand. If they're not using Iono or Judge to get back to a small hand, Comfy just goes, you have big hand, now you have small hand. Now I made you Milk Star. So yeah, relevant. Some more disruption in here being Handheld Fan. If the Pokemon this is attached to gets attacked, you're just going to bounce an energy off it onto one of your opponent's other bench Pokemon. So you can be putting energy onto things that don't attack and just making it very difficult for your opponent to kind of have the resources in the proper locations. And then we've also got Calamitous Wasteland, making the retreat cost of each basic non-fighting Pokemon 1 colorless energy more. Switch cards being fairly limited in the format. If you can gust something up with like Boss's Orders or Counter Catcher that has a decently high retreat cost like Bibarel, and you know that your opponent's either been milled through their switch cards or just already used them, you could theoretically lock something in the active while using Wug Trio to just mill through their deck. So kind of terrifying. But honestly, love this list, and yeah, keen to see someone really bringing mill into the tournament and finding like an interesting way to play around with it. I'm not the biggest fan of control type decks. If you've been around the channel before, you're probably aware of that. But when they are control decks that do actively have a way to make your opponent lose, I'm for it. When they're just ways that it's like they chuck Snorlax in the active and not letting people play the game and hoping it goes to time, I don't really see the logic, but being able to mill them out and finding alternate win conditions, I can respect that. In 4th place, we're seeing another Torterra list, slightly different though, as they have Galvantula as a secondary attacking line. Talked about that before, but now having it in Torterra, honestly, all for it, and having Gengar in here as well. So if this is in the discard pile, you can pop it onto your bench. It does take 3 damage counters when it does it, but it's another evolution scaling up Torterra's damage in a pinch. So yeah, just a bit of a faster way to get all your evolution pieces on the bench and being able to do big numbers. So respect it. Way to accelerate some energy out in this one too. Gardenia's Vigor, you can draw 2 cards and put up to 2 grass energy from your hand onto one of your benched Pokemon. And you also have the Joltik for 1 colorless energy. You search your deck for 2 basic grass and 2 basic lightning and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you'd like. So theoretically, turn 1, you have this, you're going second, you can be charging up 2 Turtwigs to then rare candy up into Torterras and both be attacking the next turn. So yeah, definitely a little bit threatening. Respect it. In 3rd place, we are seeing Vice, who played a deck he is titled Love Resonance. Interesting. It's got a few unique attackers in here. You've got Staraptor, who has Tailspin Away, does 60 damage for 2 colorless energy, and during your opponent's next turn, you prevent all damage done to this by Pokemon, or done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic Pokemon. So if you know your opponent's deck is fully reliant on basic Pokemon trying to attack you, you can just say, yeah, I'm invincible. And you just keep declaring that attack until you win the game. The second attack on here, 3 colorless energy, 180 base damage. You do have to discard an energy from this Pokemon, but you just reattach it the next turn and you're fine. Like, you've got energy retrieval, you got super rods, you got ways to recur energy. Shouldn't be having too much difficulty doing that. 180, dealing with most things in the format. I think Torterra is the only one we've talked about that's outside that damage cap. So yeah, honestly respect that. Another attacker in here being Bronzong. It has Evolution Jammer, 1 psychic energy, 30 damage during your opponent's next turn. They can't play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their Pokemon. So they can't rare candy into a stage 2, they can't manually evolve into a stage 1. They'd have to use something like Evolution TM to get through this. And if you know that they don't have that, well, you can just sit there and keep using Evolution Jammer and your opponent may never be able to get their game plan online. To get energy out for the Staraptor to help pay for that attack cost, and for your other attacker, Enamorus, it's got Love Resonance, so that's kind of where the title of the deck comes from. Psychic, double colorless, 80 damage, and if any of your Pokemon in play are the same type as any of your opponent's Pokemon in play, it does 120 more, so effectively 200 base damage on a basic Pokemon that we can quickly charge up with Xatu, and you just need to match the type of one of your opponent's Pokemon to do it. A little bit intimidating, so yeah, respect that. Big number on a stage 2, big number on a basic. Pretty To help for the matching up of the types though, you've got Basculin as your water type, who has Gathered the Crew to help establish your bench, Tatsugiri being a dragon type while having attract customers to help you get into supporter cards and online, Morpeko covering your dark Pokemon while also having a free retreat if it doesn't have any energy on it, so a great pivot option for you so that Xatu can be charging up energy to your bench Pokemon. Chuck Morpeko in the active after something's got knocked out, Xatu to Enamorus, another Xatu to Enamorus, attach return to Enamorus, pivot into it, scary. Base Bronzor being Steel type for you, and then the Starly line being your colorless Pokemon, as well as having Rapska for your bench protection and effect protection while covering your grass type. So it's going to protect you against effects and bench damage. So if your opponent tries to use like Devolution TM, you just go like, nah, that's okay. Just ignore it. So honestly, I love this list. Very, very creative. And yeah, Vice, always a pleasure seeing you come up to these tournaments. In second place, we are seeing Jamjar piloting Bearlock. So it's his Ursaluna list. We've seen him pilot it a few times in these tournaments. And yeah, it's pretty scary. A couple new additions he did make to the list though, which I'll cover first, just in case you have seen this before. Milotic. So it has Mentally Calm. Your opponent's Pokemon in play and all attached cards to them can't be put into your opponent's hand. So that means if you try and use something like Penny, which puts a basic Pokemon from play back into your hand, you can't. Or Professor Turos, you just can't. Charins, nope, can't do it. So basically what they're trying to do with this list, the Bearlock list, is use things like Snorlax, who has block and can just lock your opponent's active in, well, the active. They can't hard retreat out of it. They need to use switch cards to get out of the active. They've got Eerie, they can make you discard your switch cards so that you can't do that repeatedly. Bad times. And then it also makes it, by having this, you can't even use things like Penny to get around Snorlax. You basically have to boss this out of the active and bring up something else to try and knock them out, but then they put Snorlax back into the active. They're trying never to take prizes so that they always have Counter Catcher online to keep gusting different things up while still having their supporter free for the turn. It's a little bit terrifying, and to make sure they always have Counter Catcher, they have Ursaluna, who has Peat Hunt. You put 2 cards from your discard pile into your hand. So they can be looping their counter catchers. They can be looping other things like rare candies. They can even be looping things like stadiums and supporter cards. It's a bit terrifying. They aren't fully reliant on just going like, hey, lock something in the active, they can't play the game though. They do have Chandelure, which can be milling your opponents. When you evolve up into this, you get to discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. So Ursaluna technically could be looping something like, yeah, the Professor Turo, who's picking up the Chandelure and let's say a rare candy. They go Peat Hunt, they go rare candy, Turo this up, bench the Litwick, next turn, rare candy into Chandelure, Peat Hunt, get rare candy, get Turo, keep doing that till you mail them out. It's intimidating. And it's one of those things that like, I don't know, I don't like Control when they're just trying to run you out of time, but when they do actually have like a checkmate position that they're aiming to get to, where they can just win in an alternate condition, respect it. So like this, honestly, respect it. And it's one of those things that as players, we do need to be aware that Control decks exist and have answers to them. The rest of the list, they've got the Gallade engine. So Gallade Buddy Catch can grab you a supporter card every single turn. So it's just a great way to guarantee themselves that they get into that Turo when they need it, or Charins, or Misfortune Sisters, or Boss. And then they have Curlier for some draw power to help them get into key pieces. Cleffa as a free retreating Pokemon, while also having Grasping Draw, makes a great attack early in the game just to get yourself into a 7-card hand and establish your board. Abra being a great way to infinitely loop your deck too. So you're never going to be in a position where you're going to deck yourself out of the game if you have Abra and if you have Jet Energy. Abra has the ability Teleporter. Once during your turn, if this is in the active spot, you can shuffle it and all cards attached to it back into the deck. So you just go Abra, bounce back into the deck. You get it in your next turn, like if you're down to a 1 or 2 card deck, you top deck the Abra, you put it on your bench, you go Jet Energy, you bounce Abra back into the active spot, you Teleporter it back in. So you're never running out of your cards, but your opponent is slowly running themselves out. It's not a great way to win games, but it is a way to win games. They've also got Mawile that has Tempting Trap, 1 colorless energy, you can make it so your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat. So similar to Snorlax, but on an attack. It does also make it that if you declare an attack into them, they take 90 more damage the following turn. So you can technically take knockouts with this deck. Like Ursaluna, you can do 200 damage for 3 colorless energy, so you could just be manually charging it up with Psychic, Jet energies, Mist energies, or if you're behind in prizes, Reversal energy. This can come up because there's situations where your opponent might have one key piece that helps them out in a matchup. For example, there's Gengar. I'll pull that one up for you guys just to show you what I'm talking about. This one. Once during your turn, you may switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. So if they're trying to like lock you into having something stuck in the active with Snorlax, you're going to try and have Gengar in play that's just making it so you can bounce things around. Well, they might see that you're doing that. They go, all right, I want to attack you with Ursaluna. They also have Lost City, so they can knock you out with Ursaluna and Lost Zone your Gengar so that you're not able to re-establish that. That's a little bit terrifying. Glade can also do 160, which is pretty relevant, and even the Milotic can attack for 100, which would hit weakness into Fire-type decks, which might be relevant when you see what won this week. So, some Muppet named Triple B TCG played Charizard. So there's a Charizard from Pokemon Go who has the ability Burn Brightly. Each basic fire energy attached to your Pokemon provides 2 fire energy. You can't apply more than 1 Burn Brightly ability at a time though, so it's basically just doubling the value of your fire energy. The attack on here is 2 fire, 2 colorless, but with the ability it basically just reads, your attack is 2 fire energy, you do 170, you discard all energy from this Pokemon. To help out into that control matchup, you've got Armarouge. It has Fire Off, allowing you as often as you'd like during your turn to move a fire energy from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. And then you got a bunch of fire type attackers in here. Well, a bunch of fire type Pokemon that can all be attacking. The only exception is Manaphy. This is the only Pokemon that doesn't have an attack that needs fire or colorless to attack. You got Penny, so that into that control matchup, you can just Penny, pick up your Manaphy, or ideally get this in your hand and use Ultra Ball to discard it so that they don't use something like Erica's Invitation to bring it up into the active and lock it with Snorlax. So if it ever gets to a point where he's trying to Snorlax lock you, you just move around energy with Armarouge and keep attacking them. They've got that Lost City though, and could attack you with Milotic or Ursaluna or something like that. So if they Lost Zone your Armarouge, well, they'd have to do it twice, but Lost Zone 2 Armarouge, be in a pretty tight spot, but it was one of those things of, you need an answer into control decks, and this is the answer that I came up with. It was, I'm going to have a deck that everything is offensive and can be attacking. And that's what I went for, and it went pretty well this week. So we've got the Charizard doubling the energy, we've got the Armarouge moving around the energy so that we always have key attackers, or energy in play for key attackers. To keep energy in play though, when something gets knocked out, obviously the energy gets discarded. We've got experience share, so ideal game plan, you've got experience shares on your Armarouge or on your Charizard. The active gets knocked out, the energy gets moved to these guys, Armarouge moves it back up to a new attacking option. You have a Moltres that has free retreat as long as it has a fire energy attached to it, so something gets knocked out, pop Moltres into the active, you can move a fire energy up to it and pivot it into something else, then move up the energy if you do need to find something from your deck with like an Ultra Ball or a Nest Ball, so you're not in a bind ever. And it's also got a pretty solid attack, needing 3 fire energy. You do have to discard 2 of those fire energy, but you're going to do 120 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. With Charizard in play, that means you need 2 fire energy to be using this attack, and you only have to discard 1 to pay that secondary effect. Then when this gets knocked out, an energy gets moved to the bench with an experience share on like an Armarouge, and you're kind of just looping that into different attackers. We do have another Moltres in here, so the 2 copies of a card with the same name rule does apply. These are 2 Moltreses, so you can only have 1 copy of each, but this one, if it's damaged, you're going to do 70 more damage with the attack Inferno Wings, so early in the game, it can be, you know, a bit of pressure for your opponent since you have Magma Basin in the list, which is the other way to kind of keep energy in play. You can put a fire energy from your discard pile to one of your bench fire Pokemon. They're going to take 2 damage counters when you do it. So it's a great way to just activate the secondary effect of this attack, be taking out pre-evolution Pokemon from your opponent, or taking out like decently, I don't know, like mid-range, let's call them stage 1s, like Curlias and things like that. This can be one-shot in them, so it's a really great option to have. Entei being another amazing attacking option in here, 130 base HP, but with the ability Pressure, you take 20 less damage from attacks, so effectively 150 HP if they're going for one shot, or scaling up for if they're having to hit you multiple times. The attack on here, Blaze Bolt, does 60 base damage and 20 more for every fire energy attached to it. So at the minimum, you're going to be doing 120, 3 fire energy on here, it's 60 plus 60, but with Charizard in play, you can be doubling that and just hitting some ridiculous numbers if you need, just kind of to have like uncapped damage potential. Another uncapped damage potential guy we have in here, well I guess not uncapped since we do only have 8 fire energy, but Torkoal. So Concentrated Fire does 80 damage as a multiplier, so you're going to flip a coin for every fire energy attached to this Pokemon, then for each head's 80 damage. So with Charizard, effectively you need at least 2 fire energy to attack with this, meaning you'd be flipping 4 points. So half the time you're going to be hitting at least 160, but potentially you're going up from there, and then obviously you can be boosting the amount of energy on here to just be hitting higher numbers than that if you want. Chu-Yu being another great attacking option in here with Mega Fire of Envy. It does 50 base damage, but if any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack, it does 90 more. So effectively 140 energy for 2 fire. So that's a Magma Basin and an attached for turn, or with a Charizard in play, 1 fire energy to do 140. Pretty solid. First attack on here, you can attach up to 2 basic fire energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon, so a great way to accelerate some energy out in the early game if you're using something like Ultra Ball to discard some fire energy, or using Research to discard them as well. For the supporter line, since we don't really have draw support Pokemon to help in this list, like we don't have Bibarel, we don't have Dunsparce, I didn't want to run it with Iono, so we do have Research just for straight draw. We've got Morty's Conviction to discard a card from your hand and draw a card for each one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, so a great way to target down a fire energy and then draw potentially into 5 more cards. Gets Magma Basin online, it lets you keep things like Rare Candy while potentially digging for a Charizard or an out for a Charizard, so it can be really helpful, as well as Mela. You can only use this card if one of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, but you're going to attach a basic fire energy card from your discard pile, so another way to kind of keep energy in play, and then draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. Honestly, great card, really like it. Something that I did kind of find with this list though is it would have been nice to have a bit more draw power, so like a 1/1 line of Bibarel would have been useful, would have kind of hurt us a little bit into the control matchup, but having a colorless attack cost, it would be fine, or even like 1/1 to Dunsparce line could work for this too. The rest of the cards in here though, I feel like kind of go without saying, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Love to hear what you guys thought of this, the top 8 of this format, and if you are going to participate in next week's tournament, what kind of deck would you be cooking up? There's going to be a link in the description if you do want to sign up. We host these every Friday night for Australian Central Time, and once a month we do have a tournament that's a little bit more accessible for players over in North America. It's the first Friday of each month, so if you're keen for that, make sure to keep your eye out for when announcements come out around that. Hope you enjoyed the video though, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate from asking in the comments down below. Now I kind of feel like I'm rambling though. I am recording this live. It's nearly 1 o'clock. We've wrapped up the tournament a little bit ago, just going through the top 8. So yeah, I hope it all made sense. And if there's anything that needs a bit more information, just let me know, guys. But if you did enjoy the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and until next time, stay golden, you Goombas.